Hopefully everybody can hear me, hopefully everybody can see everything. Thank you very much for the introduction, Sarah, and thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today about the new initiative, which is the Physical Sciences Data Infrastructure, or PSDI. So obviously, as mentioned, I'm obviously Dr. Nicola Knight, and I'm going to be presenting with my colleague and boss, Professor Simon Coles, about this PSDI and this intensive pilot project that we're running. We are going to be doing a little bit of audience engagement this morning. Make sure you're all wide awake first thing in the morning. So if everybody does have either a laptop or a smartphone, it's really simple to do. But yeah, we'll jump right in so that we hopefully don't run out of time. And we'll see if the slides will progress. There we go. So in the 21st century, we're doing really amazing things with scientific research, and we've been shown that with a wide variety of the talks that we've been presented so far at this conference. So with a lot of the advancements that we've got in computing, we can also be a lot more ambitious in what we're doing into our research. So there has been an explosion in recent years and decades in the quantity and the detail of data that can now be generated. But we need to build upon this data generation and connect this up across the whole research data lifecycle. So this bulleted list on the slide shows a very limited example of some of the types of data that could be produced within physical sciences that many of you will be familiar with. So while we have access to a lot of the data in this list, it's often patchy in its availability, it's poorly described, it's difficult to reuse. Something that's consistently raised by researchers, often in many of the events that are run by the network, is about how you need access to this quality data, need to be able to sort of transport it between different things, link everything up together, because that is one of the massive pain points in doing your research. So it needs to be easy to access and reuse, comprehensively described, and integrated with tools to facilitate your research. So facilitating the connections across this whole research lifecycle is no small vision. It's instead this grand ambition of where physical sciences research can get to in the future, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we sort of want to achieve that. So I've raised the idea of connecting across the research lifecycle. We're now going to try on a little bit of audience engagement. So if everybody who does have a device could navigate to vivox.app, it should be very easy, just simply through your browser, and then type in that ID. I did test this last night. It did work. This is probably almost worse. I have done. Yeah. Yes, I have done. This is almost worse than doing a live demo, because lots of things could go wrong. So these details, if you haven't already done them, they are on the bottom of the slide. So we're going to start this, and I'm going to enter and open it.
You've done well.
And hopefully, I can see people are connected. Excellent. So this basically is just a starter warm-up question. We'll come back to the community engagement later. And this is asking you about the roles that you perform in relation to interacting with data. So please select whichever ones apply. Right, so I'll just close that question now. I will show the ID again later on. So it's now going to display the results. Excellent. Okay, so that's actually quite an even spread across most of the topics. So everybody does have a role to play across the entire data lifecycle, with, I guess, shockingly, a slight thing with the analysing data being the highest one. So, excellent. Well, that worked. So that's a success. So we will carry on a little bit with describing some of the things that we're doing in the PSDI. So obviously, we've talked about the ambitious goals that we want to achieve of connecting across the research lifecycle, but you probably don't really care so much about the ambitious goals, but you want to know a bit about potentially what it could actually mean for you as a researcher or for the community. So what we want to achieve basically through PSDI is being able to give the researchers access to mechanisms that allow them to do their research faster, to achieve new things with their research, and achieve that across a broader scope rather than potentially just within a very narrow sort of domain. So some of the things that we hope that this will be able to provide you as an actual research is being able to use the computing resources more effectively. Obviously, we have access to a lot of computing resources, but it's a defined amount. So obviously, if we can do more science with each sort of bit of computing power that we have, then obviously we can achieve a lot more. We want to be able to open it up so it's much easier to collaborate with other people, including across the computational, experimental sort of domains, across disciplines, but also with your future self, which we all know that having a collaboration between your future and past selves is often one of the most problematic collaborations that you can have. We also want to be able to provide access to quality data sets. This is a key issue that's come up a lot when we're talking about people who want to apply methods, is getting that data to actually test and develop the methods on in a way that they can actually use it. Obviously, we want to be able to allow people to then, from those data sets, enable things through AI and machine learning, and also be able to provide their data and software in a way that enables people to credit them more easily for reuse, which is something that does exist, but it's not done in a way that is quite as good as it could be at the moment. So we have a number of challenges, obviously, that we need to overcome. I won't dwell on these too much. A lot of these have been raised so far across the conference, is about the amount of data that we're now gathering, how we can make it fair, how we can integrate it across the life cycle through your entire workflow without having to do lots and lots of manual steps that take you a lot of time, then I'm pretty sure all of you would rather be doing other things with that time. But not only when you're doing it through your existing workflow, we've talked about this idea of depositing the data, making sure that it's available and that it's not just, as Sarah said, contact the author and it will be released. And then obviously that doesn't give you the data for the long term. So we can do a lot of these things, but mainly in isolation. So what we really need is this infrastructure that can link up stuff that is fit for purpose to actually enable these things to happen. So now I'm going to pass over to Simon.
Thank you. So we are an EPSRC funded, well, hope to be a program, but at the moment it's a project. So where we are in the timeline of things is that we submitted a statement of need to EPSRC, which got some community support behind us and said that there was a need for this kind of thing. And we've managed to secure some money from their digital research infrastructure strand of funding to run a pilot. And this pilot is basically evaluating what's currently out there in the community, what is needed by the community, so that we can develop a blueprint, a set of specifications for what is required, which essentially becomes the bid for the next phase where we go out and build this thing. So that's where we're at. We've got to write our recommendations and specifications kind of in the next month or two. So we're at this stage, it's a real short, fast project. We're at this stage where we're trying to engage with different user communities of physical sciences data to understand what's out there and what people want to do or need to do. So we're looking to connect up experimental and computational facilities across all of physical sciences. And that's probably our primary goal, if you like. There's a big chasm between experimental and computational work. And the idea here is to bridge that divide. So we are looking to either knit together existing infrastructures, experimental and computational, or see where there's pretty much nothing and where we need to drop in some infrastructure to kind of help us connect and join the dots. So it's about sharing all the data and sharing the resources. And in pictorial form, this is the way we think about things. So we've divided physical sciences up into what we call 4 pillars, these vertical things, just so that we can categorize people broadly into the way in which they generate and use data. So on the left-hand side there, you've got large centralized facilities. These are big experimental infrastructures that often have data infrastructures associated with them, but they still kind of operate as their own entity, and interfacing with them requires some activity. And then as we go along, we've got some slightly, we've got some slightly smaller facilities, and these ones are generally more local, but they still have some data infrastructures associated with them. And then we've got this really important one around computation and high-performance computing. These, again, we want to bridge the divide. Again, these are digital infrastructures, but generally in isolation. And then we've got the toughest one of all, which is the more individual research groups out in their institutions on the far right-hand side, operating in very diverse ways and interacting with many of these infrastructures. And then we've got two ways of cross-cutting these pillars, and that's thinking about how the data is being used, what kind of data is being used and how and where it is, and then what people are doing with the data or how it's being generated. So some of the computing facilities or data resources and how they're going to be used. Right, okay. So this is a fairly standard slide that says, gives some of the main areas where we're focusing and want to be able to connect things up or provide new facilities. And they include access to reference quality data, whether that be drafting in curated databases that are more proprietary or cleaning up existing open data resources. And of course, that access involves the data resources themselves being connected and linked up. And for this community, a really important aspect is the sharing of software, data and models particularly, and doing that through things like common catalogues. So these are things that really don't exist at the moment. Combining data, bringing data close to computation. These are all things that are kind of done, but in different parts of physical sciences and not connected up. And the aim of all of this is to drive work like AI and machine learning kind of processes and lower that barrier to being able to do those. And this is how our project's structured. Basically, we're engaging with the community. We're thinking about some of the hardware and software and data infrastructure that need to be put in, the nuts and bolts, if you like. And we're doing some real practical, small-scale projects to uncover what's required. And so I'll just talk you quickly through those small-scale projects. And then go into a bit more detail on one or two of them. So they range, the top three, if you like, are around data simulation, combining data sources, but very much in the environment, in particular environments that individual researchers or research groups are working in. The first one being with the UK Catalysis Hub and seeing how they combine data from different instrumentation and simulations. Case study 2, I'll go into a bit more detail in a minute, as with the third one. Case study 4 is about some of the infrastructure that's required, what kind of data repositories, etc., do we need to put in place, what is their function, how do we get stuff into them usefully, and how do we get stuff out of them even more usefully. Case study 5 is about how some of these experimental facilities better prepare their data for long-term curation and availability. I'll talk a bit more about 6 and 7 on another couple of slides. And we've got another one, case study 8, which is more about the metadata and the gluing together of things. We obviously think of structure as like a key currency across experimental and simulation and data resources. So how do we use structure, which means it's a word that we use and band around a lot, but means very many different things to different people. So how do we knit them together? So I picked a couple of case studies that would be more interesting to this community. This one's around crystal structure prediction and that driving the synthesis of new materials. So the crystal structure prediction is done here in Southampton, and the materials, essentially, that generates great big landscapes of potential structures to be explored experimentally. And the idea is to feed those to robots. And they're based in Liverpool, and the robots will go away and make and characterize new materials based on the crystal structure prediction. So we're kind of trying to put in a hub tool that enables the sharing and exploration of these data sets and feeding robots. This one's about magnetic materials and using the literature and databases to drive experimentation. So we're priming a new magnetic materials database by natural language processing of the literature, developing a database resource that drives experimentation and then fills itself up. And this is rather than being focused on a particular community, this is a case study that's looking at more cross-cutting, fundamental underpinning things that are required. And a main one is about recording of process, be that electronic lab notebooks in laboratories or Jupyter notebooks to capture digital work. How do we string together these different ways of recording process and put some meaning on them and provide tools that enable that meaning to be provided. So this is all about thinking about tools that people currently use, be they Microsoft based tools all the way through to specialized ELNs, but how can we add that appropriate value? And that we're looking at driving data exchange and trust in data. So there's a case study all around what does a data trust mean? What does trustworthy data mean? How do we make sure that we can generate trustworthy data so that people can access it and have confidence that it's trustworthy? I use the word trust quite a lot. We're exploring that term quite vigorously. Okay.
So now we're going to hop back. So we've talked a little bit about kind of what we aim to do, how we aim to connect stuff up. So we're going to try and get through, hopefully, a bunch of questions. So we're getting, obviously, input across a lot of wide areas. Obviously, one of them is sort of things like this, where we get to ask questions to people in different things. So if anybody hasn't, if you'd like to join the VVox app, hopefully you can see the number that is available. Yeah, hopefully it's good enough to do. So I'm going to open this slide. So this is a word cloud, so it invites you to put into up to 20 characters as a sort of a single kind of thing. So we're asking kind of what is the barrier to you completing your research sort of at the full potential that it could be. You can put in, I think, more than one answer. So feel free if you have several barriers. I think you can put in more than one answer once you've completed it. So yeah, we're aiming for just like single words, kind of what would be one of the things that you would say that is a barrier to you carrying out your research as well as you can.
Pain points. What makes your blood boil?
And then I will keep this open for, I'll say maybe up to a minute. Obviously, yes, getting audience engagement does obviously take some time, and in between we can just ad lib to the response counter slightly increasing. So I'll give this.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really good to see. So we have, I think, most of the people in the audience, based upon how many people I think should be here, have joined us. So thank you very much for engaging with us this morning. Okay, so I'm just going to close that, and fingers crossed it will display me a nice word cloud. There we go.
There you go.
Funding. Okay.
Okay, so there's some tongue-in-cheek responses here. Thank you very much. Once we've done some data polishing and filtering, I think there's probably some useful...
So there's quite a few things coming in around quality data, access to data, unlabeled data, and things around formatting. So that's a lot of the things that we've identified as this needing these things to actually be able to link up your data. So I'm going to move on, and we have a multiple choice question. Hopefully these ones should be relatively quick to go through. So this is, how much do you trust the data that you work with? I think most of you obviously do work with data, because a lot of you, 89% of you, said that you analysed data. So hopefully this one should be quite
So whilst you're answering, I didn't get much time to point out that the infrastructure that we're looking to build and develop is not just about digital tools and components. It's also about people skills is highly important, and we're very keen on developing these areas of expertise around which the community congregates. And one we've been thinking about a lot, for example, is a centre for curation, so that data, either there are specialists who are able to provide curated data, or we support the community to curate their own data. So the idea is that we might have a curation hub.
Well, it's encouraging to see that nobody completely distrusts their data, but obviously we do have some way to go in order to make sure that people are significantly more in the trust and trust a lot categories. So we're gonna... so now, in terms of the data analysis and work that you do, how much do you need to know the provenance of the data? So this isn't whether or not you do currently know the provenance of the data that you work with, but how much do you need to know the provenance of the data that you work with? Okay, so yeah, this is something that we think is not currently achieved in a way that is suitable for everybody, but is clearly necessary to the people who are carrying out their research in this room. So this question asks about whether or not a data exchange platform would be useful or necessary. So this is a place where you could be able to both share your own data, but also retrieve sort of trusted data from other parties in order to be able to then carry out sort of analysis and research on it. Okay, so I'll just give this a little bit longer until we've got a few more responses, and then... Okay. So that shows it's at least somewhat necessary to guess around over 70% of the people polled. So, okay, we have one final question, and I'm going to open this up. This is a free text field. The data won't be displayed on the screen once it's collected, it will just be captured. So this is about kind of the features that you would potentially want included in an infrastructure that would be useful to your research. So obviously we've talked about access to data or management platforms, creation of standards to be able to carry out your data like transfer. Obviously, as Simon mentioned, this doesn't only just talk about what the kind of software and hardware is that would facilitate your research, but also do you think that you would benefit from either training for expertise in areas of domain, but also or access to skilled personnel that would be able to provide some of the sort of expertise in areas that would then allow you to achieve your research more efficiently. Okay, we have 2 minutes. I am going to leave this open so hopefully it won't disappear. It's going so well so far, so hopefully it won't. So the other thing I just wanted to say, and I will put these into the Zoom chat, and if you're interested, please do come and find one of us, is basically, in addition to obviously providing some input to our answers to our questions today, we also have a survey open at the moment on research, recording and technology, which closes on the 13th of March. I will post the direct link to that in the Zoom chat and make it available, because unfortunately, if I try to show it on the screen now, it will close the poll. And you'll also, if any of you have a use case or sort of a scenario that you think would benefit from the PSDI inputting into the recommendations for how we should progress in the future, we are also inviting people to submit to our library of use cases. I will also circulate that link into the Zoom chat shortly. And
yeah, those are basically just fill in a template kind of thing. You know, what is the story around what you're trying to do? And many of you might even have use cases kind of already on the shelf that you could feed into this. As Nicola mentioned, these will help shape our recommendations. So they're really important as the body of evidence that we put forward to funders to say we need to build a thing. So this is what we'll be pointing to, and be very helpful if you could submit some.
And before Sarah cuts us off, I'd just like to say we obviously will be around for the rest of the day, so if you have any questions, do come up and find us, and we'll be happy to chat further.